Physician Associate podcast. My name is James, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Multizim. Welcome to the show, Multizim.
Thank you for having me.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, by background, I'm a specialist physiotherapist and I'm a clinical director, so I have my own clinic.
I think you are the first physiotherapist that we've had on the PA podcast.
Ooh.
So,
Yeah, I was going to say exciting.
As a physio, your specialism is in musculoskeletal injuries?
Yeah, musculoskeletal physiotherapist, yeah.
Just for the sake of some PAs who maybe don't know that much about physiotherapy, can you just give an overview of the range of specialisms that physios can work in? And because it's MSK injuries, is it?
Physiotherapy can be quite vast, actually. It's a very versatile career. You kind of go into different niches. So you can be a respiratory specialist, you can be a pediatric specialist, which basically work with children. It kind of overlaps with pediatric, overlaps with some neuro stuff, some musculoskeletal things as well. But obviously, it is quite particular to children because they respond differently. You can be a community specialist, so working out in the community, rehab specialist, working in rehabilitation, a neuro specialist, which is obviously working with patients who have neurological and severe neurological issues and strokes and things. So there's a range of places that you can go into. Obviously, some people specialize generally as well, going into A&E, elderly care. So there's quite a range of places that you can end up as a physiotherapist.
Yeah, it always amazes me when I hear physios that pop up in like ITU and working on neuro rehab or the range of specialties that physios can help. And there's some similarity as well between physiotherapists and the way that profession has developed over the UK and where PAs are. So at the moment, physician associates, we're not a regulated profession, but we know that the GMC are going to take us on with regulation. And I think looking back through some of the history books, physios weren't always regulated, and that process took probably 15, 20 years for the regulation for your profession to kick in as well. So it feels like slow progress for PAs to get to regulation, but actually compared to other professions, it's probably about right.
Yeah, I think with that comes a lot more credibility, and I know it's not in an insulting way, but it just once you're governed, you have a lot more credibility as well. So it's quite interesting to see where it transitions to from here for PAs, though, because I think the thing is with physios, now we're governed. A, there's obviously the perks of being governed, but B, there's a lot more red tape. So it's quite interesting to see where PAs will how they will be governed, and when it actually gets enforced.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about you. Where did you grow up? Where did you train? What got you into being a physio?
Obviously, I've grown up in Manchester. That's where I'm from. I went to high school in Manchester, went to college in Manchester, university. I actually went to Huddersfield University. And after that, once I qualified, I worked privately for a while with a private firm. And then I did some NHS work. So I was working in rehabilitation. I actually did some discharge to assess work, which was interesting because it wasn't by any means the area I wanted to be in at all. But I did some. Then I went into private work. So I started to work for myself as well, which was a completely different experience. So yeah, that's my transition. Very, very obviously generally.
And being a physio isn't the only string to your bow, is it? You've got interests in other sort of areas of developing yourself.
Yeah, so I do quite a variety of things, to be honest. And the funny thing is, I was actually writing a list because I was losing track of what I was interested in. But yeah, so like I said, I do a lot of public speaking. That's one key part of me. I do a lot of public speaking. I do it with students. I do it with just general public. I do it on my social medias. I do it in podcasts. Career planning for people, CV building, application, and obviously with high school students, college students, there's normally for applications and how to get into the course, interview prep. I've done it based around mental health, life coaching. I did a podcast with a life coach, and that was very much based around mindset. So yeah, public speaking, obviously key elements that I mentioned in the introduction. By background, I'm a clinical director, so I have my own clinic, which from a business perspective, I've always aspired to do. And my plan before I even started university was one of my goals was to have my own clinic and have my own clients, basically, which is what I transitioned to. So I've got my own little clinic area in Manchester as well. So that's a challenging but a very, very good learning opportunity having a business, especially in healthcare, because obviously with physiotherapy, you have to follow HCPC standards. You have to make sure your clients are happy, customer service. Majority of it is actually sales. So it's quite interesting going down that route as well. And just in and out, I do some, like health and fitness work as well. So this is where I'll do some personal training with some clients and things. So, but again, as you can imagine, that all spirals into and around my underlying knowledge with physiotherapy.
I was just thinking when you were was talking about public speaking. It's such an important skill for any healthcare professional to be able to do, isn't it? But not something that comes very easily to a lot of people.
Yeah. Do you know what? Since high school, I remember everyone, even the teachers, used to say to me, "You're good at speaking." And I was like, "Yeah, but everyone's good at speaking." Everyone can speak. Same thing in college. And I think this is where ignorance comes in, doesn't it? Where in college, I was the guy in uni, I was the guy that loved presentation work. I'd be like, "Yeah, let's do some presentations." Everyone would be like, "Why? Like, why do you want to do presentations?" Like, let's do some presentations. And then obviously went to uni. That's when in uni, that's when I started doing public speaking stuff with students. So I used to go back to my old school. And then over time, especially when I qualified, I realized, and people tend to look at obviously the academic side of things, especially in placements. And I want to relate it back a bit to physio and PA work as well, considering the podcast. So if you imagine as a healthcare professional, you're on your placements and you're looking majority of the time really at what the person's saying and what the patient's saying and what the professional is saying. I think what's neglected is how they're saying it. And all the cliches, and they are obviously cliches because they're repeated a lot, aren't they? You have to be empathetic and sensitive and understanding. But something I think is, like I said, is quite ignored is how it's said in your communication style. And public speaking, like you mentioned, is huge. And that's something I realized after I qualified. I think it's probably one of the most paramount skills you can start trying to acquire, especially if you're still studying in any healthcare professions. And something I started to do independently was go over, mental health counselling work. So I started to do some counselling courses. I started to do some psychology courses. I bought some psychology books. I started to learn through all this stuff. And I'll give you an example. One of my clients, I know they won't mind me saying this, I could tell they're quite pented up. And I was just wondering, I was like, why is he so pented up? But I sensed it very, very early on the first initial assessment. I sensed he was quite pented up about something. But I ignored it. I thought, I'm going to leave it as an initial assessment. Maybe people are feeling anxious because it's physiotherapy. So obviously it's stressful in itself because you have to ask clients to undress, you speak about personal issues, you ask them red flaggy questions like your urination and sexual function and things. So I thought maybe it's just that discomfort initially. You get hands-on and things. So the second session, again, they were pented up and I felt it. And I just thought, do you know what? I'm going to ask the question. So I went, look, is everything okay? And how are you getting on? Like, how are these issues actually affecting you mentally? Like, are you feeling okay? And the client just burst out in tears. And I just thought, oh, well, this is interesting. And they were just like, I can't do anything. I can't get back to my life. I can't go back into my normal routines. I can't run. I want to do this marathon. I've been training for months. I can't do it. It was like, I can't get back. I can't spend time with my daughters, my family, my wife. I've got grandchildren. I can't do any of this. And obviously I spent 30 minutes of the assessment just speaking about and coaching them through and reassuring them. So it's not obviously directly mental health work as a profession, but I think, and this might be again another thing that universities and institutions and maybe just health workplaces in general can focus on, and that's just giving clinicians and professionals some training in mental health coaching, which is something that I did independently, and it really worked in that session because they came back after that and they bounced back like crazy. Like they came back to the third session and they were bouncing off the walls, they were excited, they were happy, and you could just see a burden lifted off their shoulder. And I just thought, that's my therapy done for the day. Like obviously we had hands-on therapy, but but we
therapy can take many forms, can't it?
Yeah, exactly. After so long of working as a physio, and obviously I was mediocrely doing, my mental health work as well, on and off. Like, with clients, they were saying, look, I'm having this nightmare. And I'm like, okay, look, let me talk you through it and stuff. Or I'm just feeling quite stressed and anxious about this injury. Let me talk you through it and things. But with this one client in particular, it was a full-blown counselling session. But when I saw the outcome of that, like literally, I discharged him just recently, actually. And something they said, they were just like, we can't thank you enough because that was affecting my whole life. And I just thought, okay, I've done something right. Even if it's not hands-on work, right? I've done something right. So yeah, it's quite important. So yeah, I think from my perspective, that's how I've worked, and I think it's quite important. Something that universities don't usually pick up on is giving them those trainings.
So much of the work I do as a physician associate has mental health or ill health, and actually there was a word you used earlier to describe yourself. You said you were just mediocrely going along talking to people about their mental health, and it actually sounds like you were doing anything but being mediocre in terms of looking after your patients. But is imposter syndrome, or is it lack of confidence in yourself? Is that something that you've had to deal with?
Yeah, so I think notoriously I downplay, a lot of things. because I think majority of this is imposter syndrome. Even in college, I was having quite significant imposter syndrome as a student in college. But I'll be honest, at the risk of sounding boastful, I was a high achieving college student. So I was winning national awards in sciences, and that's what I was in. I was in sciences. I was winning national awards. I was top of my classes, but I suffered from imposter syndrome. Same thing happened in university. I came to university as every student does normally. Like, I was nervous about everything. I was worried about everything. I remember at one point, and this is how bad it got. At one point, I knocked on a client's door, a patient's door on placement, and I turned around to an educator and went, "It was like, okay." And I still think back to that day. I know it sounds really petty, but it was literally that bad. It became that bad. I knocked on the door, and literally turned around, looked at her, and I was like, "Is that okay?" It was like, okay to knock on like that. I remember I just burst into tears, and he was like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "I'm a rubbish physio." I was like, "I don't know what I'm doing." I study every single day. I'm grafting. I'm working really hard. I was like, I see people, the normal students going out there messing about, having fun, not bothered. I was like, 24/7, I'm working, and I'm still not figuring things out. And he went, like, we all suffer through this. I'm like, no, I'm not good enough. I was like, I'm not good enough at all. I can't do this. I can't do that. There's other physio that are better than me. But as I specialised and became band six, even worse. I thought I'd get my band six run. I went to my friends. I went, if I get this band six job, it will give me that adulation I wanted. It'll give me that reassurance I want. Because I was like, the interviewers are not stupid. They'll know. They'll see right through me. If I'm not worthy to be a band six. I got the band six role. I did that job for a week, and I was just like, probably not a week, a day. And I was just like, I'm not worthy to be a band six. I was like, I'm not good enough to be a band six. I'm not good enough to be a band six. I'm like, who am I to tell my clients things? These cynical thoughts just absolutely engulfed me. I was like, who are you to tell this person this? How dare you? This person's a runner, and you're telling them how to run, and you don't run yourself. Things like these little issues. This person's a personal trainer. How dare you tell them about fitness and exercise? I remember it came to a point where I spoke to one of my senior colleagues who's been in the industry for probably like 20, 30 years. And she just said to me, she went, look, she was like, even I suffer with imposter syndrome. She was like, it's very, very normal. She was like, but she went, you don't think I think of it from your perspective, the way you speak to me is, it's good. She was like, yours is not consuming you negatively where you're affecting your clients. She was like, yours is always questioning, which is true. Mine's always questioning. So I'll always say something to my client, and I'll question it as in, actually, maybe I can give you one better, or I'll do one better, or I'll give you better explanations. So I'm always questioning how to be better. And then she said, I think that's more you trying to be the best version or the best physio you can be. And then again, I was listening to this podcast, and it came at the perfect time because I was feeling at one point in my career, and this was recently, I was feeling really, really low. Dealing with the imposter syndrome, I felt like it just expended, it just used up all my energy. And in this podcast, the psychologist said, he went, if you reach a new level, expect to experience imposter syndrome. And in my head, I'm just thinking, why would he say that? I've just become a band six. Like, why would he say that? Why would he say, like, expect to feel? And I thought, maybe I'm a crazy person. He went, because every time you reach a new peak, it's a new peak. He went, so you're going to feel rocky. You're going to feel inexperienced. It's new. He went, you should expect to feel like imposter syndrome. He went, if you don't feel like imposter syndrome, I'd be worried, because he went, that's showing overconfidence. And he was like, if you're a clinician and you're overconfident, he went, that's when mistakes happen. And when he said it like that, I went, oh my God, that makes so much more sense. Because when you're on I was like, it's like if I was a 100-meter sprinter, for example, and I started to try to go 200 meters, only because I'm amazing, I could be the best 100-meter sprinter in the world, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be great at 200. That's a new platform for me. So I need to start working towards that. So I still might be a great 100-meter sprint, and I might be going into 200 meters now. That's my next goal, but it's still a new goal and target for me. I think something that I suffered with was, when do I actually feel confident in myself? I don't know if everyone keeps telling me imposter syndrome is okay sometimes. It makes you feel, at least it makes sure it's making you more conscientious around what you're doing. When do I start feeling confident? Or when do I actually use confidence in my life? Like, do you see what I mean? Like, I felt like that was always conflicted.
I think the point about when something in your life changes, if you go from being a band 5 physio to a band 6, or you go from being a student PA to a qualified PA, or change your jobs into a new specialty, knowing that you should expect some imposter syndrome is actually really comforting to hear, isn't it? And makes a lot of sense, but no one really ever tells you that.
Yeah, yeah, and this again, it kind of complements my point earlier on where I said, universities and institutions are good at preparing you for academic life and obviously potentially some professional life. But something I think that's massively important in professionalism is expecting this imposter syndrome, because I know, and like I said, and I'll be very honest about this, because it's not going to harm me and it might help someone else. But my imposter syndrome was so serious, like I said to you, so serious to a point where I was questioning how to knock on a door for a client, like just simple everyday tasks, knock on a door that everyone will do, professional or not. I was scared of. I was like, oh my God. I literally thought, but that day I think back to, because I was like, I remember I was bursting into tears after that because I just thought this is ridiculous. Like, I went, it's really close to damaging my career. This, I went, because if it gets any worse, I was like, I'm going to need a timeout. Like, I'm going to need a break to figure things out for myself. But luckily, and I think fortunately, I've got really good control. I've got really good self control. But like I said, universities, sometimes workplaces don't actually prepare you for that. They don't prepare you to think, by the way, as a professional, one part of professionalism is experiencing imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome is going to be inevitable. I don't think I know anyone in my whole life, whatever profession, life coach, physiotherapist, personal trainer, businessman, CEO. I have clients that are like CEOs, entrepreneurs, multimillionaires, and none of them, not one of them has said to me they've not suffered from imposter syndrome. All of them say to me, without fail, if we have a conversation, we've had imposter syndrome or something around imposter syndrome. When we have a conversation, just like, how's your life? What's going on? What do you do? What did you do in the past? These nice conversations you have. Every single one of them, without fail, have said something around imposter syndrome, like, we weren't really confident, but we took the risk. Or we weren't feeling ourselves. We didn't think we could be here, but look, we're here. Like, and it's amazing to hear those types of comments from people, because it just, I think, something for me, like I said, like you said, it's reassuring. It's like reassurance as in you're not the only person suffering through it. There are people that are going through it, and it's a normal phase. And something I said to one of my educators on placement, I said to them, they were giving me some reassurance. I went, I know it sounds silly, but it makes me feel better, because it makes me see that I'm not special. And I say that like that. Like, I'm not special. That I'm feeling imposter syndrome. It's a normal sensation. It's a normal experience you go through. I feel like if you don't go through it, sometimes it's actually dangerous. Obviously, as well, and PAs will know in particular. Going from band five, from undergrad to a band five, it's two different ballparks. Student to qualified is completely different game, and there's a lot to learn, like a lot more to learn. So, yeah, so I just think sometimes it's good if you see the positives in it, but if you let it completely engulf you, then yeah, you're in a dangerous game that you need to be prepared for.
Are there any resources or books or any places you'd point people who are feeling the imposter syndrome and problems with confidence, and where would you say they could go to find out more?
So to be fair, when I started to feel imposter syndrome, the first thing I did was I like research and stuff. So I literally Googled research around imposter syndrome. Now there's no real articles that I went to. I went to the NHS website. I looked at through the NHS website through the imposter syndrome, just to give me a basic overview. Because I knew obviously I'd understand that best, because it's made for general public without the healthcare knowledge. So I looked through that. But I think my main advice would be, if someone is suffering from imposter syndrome, regardless of their profession, is speak to someone they trust. That's all I say to people. Even my clients, I'll just say to them, speak to someone you can trust. They don't have to be a family member. It can actually be a stranger. Like, if you have a client that you know, you could trust them with your whole heart. Just tell them. Just speak to them. If they're open to listening, just speak to them. Have a nice conversation with them. Or if you trust someone and you know they're credible and they're honest, just speak to that. If it's an educator, supervisor, senior, mentor, I think speaking is probably my main advice, because as soon as you start speaking to people, you'll recognize and acknowledge that this is something that everyone experiences. So that's point number one. So all that does is tick off in your head, actually, I'm not being unreasonable, or I'm not suffering with unnecessary problems. It's a problem that everyone suffers with. Two, it'll help you recognize and acknowledge that it's something that you can recover from, you can learn from. And then three, when you speak to someone, or just anyone in general, there's always ideas. And I always think about this, regardless of your profession, regardless of the status or position. I always think speaking to anyone will give you a different idea. And whatever you do, it'll give you a different idea. So I normally say my main advice is speak to someone that you can trust. just get it out there, speak to someone. And I know it's such a I hate giving cliches. I like being that guy that gives very unique answers, but honestly, with this one, I can't even give you a unique answer. It's just as simple as speak to someone.
Being able to speak to somebody, and coming back to what we were saying right at the beginning of this podcast episode about doing public speaking, being able to speak and being able to articulate and communicate yourself, is so important, because sometimes you need to be able to do it to ask for help.
Yes, that is the perfect way of bringing this end part of this podcast and that beginning part together. It's the public speaking, communication, and knowing how to articulate and adapt and then replicate those into different atmospheres. And something I posted on one of my social medias is how to be a confident speaker. And one of the points is learning how to formulate it and then using it in different settings. So if I'm speaking to my best friends, I'm not going to speak to my best friends the same way I speak to my mentors or supervisors or my clients. It'll be very different. But then if I want to make the exact same point, which majority of the time I do, sometimes, like if I'm speaking to my best friends about how to overcome imposter syndrome, for example, I'll say it very differently to them to how I say it to my clients. But then it's the articulation, formulation, and then replication. But how do you replicate that in a different setting? That's where your practice and adaptation skills come in. So yeah, I'm really, really happy that you made that point, because it's a very good point.
It's something you said right at the beginning of the episode as well, was around everybody can talk, and you assumed when you were younger that everybody can do public speaking and everybody can. And actually, I think one of the things I've learned as being a clinician in the early part of my career at the moment is patients and people that I work with and colleagues that I work with often can't articulate what's wrong with them that easily. And I assume everyone can talk openly and honestly. And part of the art of being clinical is knowing how to draw that out of your patients. And
maybe it was ignorance and a lack of understanding that communication doesn't come easily. And I think it relates back to that point that I was telling you, the example I was giving you about my client, where we were in that conversation. It was about trying to draw out emotional stuff. And obviously, as you can imagine, it's always feeling quite distraught. And they've got stigmas of being a man, for example, and you've got all these other factors at play. It's quite hard to extract those information, but that makes a massive difference to your rehab plan, for example, whatever profession you are, it makes a massive difference. And like you said, I'll be honest, even on my placements and even when I qualified, I always thought everyone should be good at speaking. Everyone can speak. Everyone can do it. It's not hard. And it obviously a really ignorant thought, because people suffer from anxiety, just stress, social anxiety, just little different things. And
I suppose it's fair to say imposter syndrome isn't unique to healthcare professionals, but perhaps can affect healthcare professionals uniquely because of the nature of our work that we deal with. But it will cut across age, young, old. It will cut across titles, doctors, consultants, PAs, physios. It will cut across gender. It will cut across cultural lines. Everybody can feel imposter syndrome, basically, is the point I'm trying to make, isn't it? And if you're able to spot that in somebody else and use your skills as a speaker to get them to open up, that could be life-changing for that clinician that you're working with.
Which I think is a nice way to include it, is as simple as imposter syndrome will affect every demographic and ethnicity and just everything in general. It affects anyone at any time. And I think, like you said, to summarize it, it's as simple as if you spot it and you know how to handle it or treat it or signpost someone, do it. And vice versa, if you're having it and experiencing it, signpost yourself to someone or speak to someone. It's a nice way to conclude the session, I guess.
Perfect way to put it. Yeah, definitely. Martin, thank you for giving up the time to come on the PA podcast. Really appreciate it, mate. Where can people go to find out more about you and what you're all?
Obviously, from my Instagrams, you'll basically find me everywhere else. So you'll find me like TikToks, and you'll find my physiotherapy Instagram pages. You'll find my YouTube. You'll find everything that I have. But yeah, obviously, I just want to put this out there. If anyone needs any support, guidance, advice, I don't really charge for it. I'm more than open just to helping people out, giving them the right directions, educating, basically. That's what I'm all about, educating people to the right paths. Hence why I'm a multipath.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'll leave links for your socials on the episode notes so that people can find you through there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
And thanks to you for listening as well. It was a slightly different episode than we usually make on the PA podcast, and I found it really fascinating to talk to multisim. I hope you learned a lot as well, and will be able to think a bit differently about imposter syndrome if that's something that's affected you. If you've got an idea for a future episode of the PA podcast, it'd be great to hear from you. Please reach out to me on social media at PA Podcast UK, and I hope you'll join me again for the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Precision Associate Podcast.